Out here on the open prairie of southwestern Minnesota, where the land runs flat to every horizon, you do not expect to find a Great Lake. And yet here it is, the largest lake in this whole corner of the state, so wide that its far shore fades into the haze. Its name comes from the Ojibwe language, and it means pelican. A river begins in these waters that will not reach its end until it has crossed into another state entirely. And along this quiet shoreline, history was made in ways both proud and heartbreaking. This is Lake Shetek State Park near Currie, Minnesota, on a late November afternoon, and we are going for a walk. Let us get our bearings first. We are in Murray County, in the far southwestern corner of Minnesota, deep in old tallgrass prairie country. The nearest town is Currie, a small farming community that sits just south of the park. Lake Shetek State Park occupies about 1,100 acres along the southeastern shore of the lake. It is a long drive from the forests and bluffs that most people picture when they think of Minnesota. Out here the story is water, grass, and sky. The park's trails trace the shoreline and loop through bands of trees that hug the water. It is the 22nd of November, so the leaves are down and the light comes in low and silver off the lake. In summer, these campgrounds and swimming beaches are busy, but on a day like this, you can have the whole shoreline nearly to yourself. That quiet suits this place. Lake Shetek rewards the walker who slows down and listens. Lake Shetek is the largest lake in southwestern Minnesota. It spreads across nearly 3,600 acres, yet it is remarkably shallow, reaching a maximum depth of only about 10 feet. That is the signature of a prairie lake, broad and gentle rather than deep and cold. Shallow water warms quickly, grows rich with plants and insects, and feeds enormous numbers of fish and birds. What it lacks in depth, it repays in life. Walking the shore in late November, you catch the lake in its quietest mood. The summer birds have mostly moved on, and the first hard freezes are near. Soon this whole surface will lock up in ice for the winter. But even now there is movement out on the water, late migrants resting and feeding before the cold closes in. The prairie year turns slowly around this lake, and we have arrived at the turning. This lake is a gift of the Ice Age. Glaciers buried this region under sheets of ice, and as they melted, torrents of water carved channels through the debris left behind. Sediment built up natural banks and dams along one of those channels, and water pooled behind them to form the wide, shallow basin we see today. Lake Shetek also holds a special place in American geography because it is the source of the Des Moines River. Water leaving this lake flows south across Minnesota and the length of Iowa before joining the Mississippi. A river of the plains begins right here. The trees along this shore are their own small miracle. Native prairie once covered this country, kept open by wildfire and grazing, and trees survived mostly where water gave them shelter. So the lakeshore carries these ribbons of woods while the uplands beyond stretch out as grassland and farm fields. Walking here, you pass through both worlds in a few steps. It is a borderland, and borderlands are always rich. The name Shetek comes from the Ojibwe word for pelican. It is a fitting name because American white pelicans still visit this lake in the summer and fall. They are among the largest birds on the continent, brilliant white with black flight feathers, and they fish these shallows in coordinated groups. Watching a flock of pelicans wheel over prairie water, you understand why the name stuck. The lake was known by its birds long before it was known by its settlers. Along the trail, the line between land and lake keeps blurring. Cattail marsh grades into wet meadow, and wet meadow into open water. These soggy margins are the engine of the whole ecosystem. They filter the water, shelter young fish, and hide the nests of ducks and wrens and blackbirds. A prairie lake is really a family of wetlands holding hands. Lake Shetek sits in the Prairie Pothole region, one of the most important waterfowl landscapes in North America. When the glaciers retreated, they left millions of shallow depressions scattered across the northern plains. Each spring those depressions fill with meltwater and become ponds and marshes, wetlands often called the continent's duck factory. A huge share of North America's ducks hatch in this region. The potholes are small, but together they shape the skies of an entire continent. Stand still on this trail for a minute and just listen. Wind in the dry grass, waves slapping the stones, and somewhere out on the water the murmur of resting birds. In spring and fall, this soundscape swells as migration pours through the flyway. Generations of travelers, feathered and human alike, have paused at this lake to rest and feed. It has always been a stopping place on the way to somewhere else. Twice a year, the sky above this lake becomes a highway. Ducks, geese, swans, and shorebirds funnel through the prairie pothole country on their journeys between breeding grounds and wintering grounds. A big shallow lake like Shetek is a natural service station, offering food and safe open water. On peak migration days, the rafts of birds can stretch far across the surface. It is one of the great wildlife spectacles of the southern Minnesota prairie, and it has been happening every year for thousands of years. Ahead of us now is one of the park's most beloved features. Just offshore, near the boat access, sits Loon Island, a wooded island rising from the shallow water. You do not need a boat to reach it. A narrow causeway runs straight out from the mainland, with lake water lapping on both sides. Crossing it feels a little like walking on the lake itself. That causeway is a piece of history under your feet. It was built in the 1930s by crews of the Works Progress Administration, the great public jobs program of the Depression years. Workers laid stone and gravel across the shallows to connect Loon Island to the mainland. The island trail rewards the crossing with woods and quiet shoreline views. Generations of families have made this same short pilgrimage. Few of them realize they are walking on Depression-era handiwork. Out on the island, the woods close in and the mainland falls away. The water on every side protected these trees from the prairie fires that once swept the uplands, so islands like this one grew into little arcs of forest. In November, the bare branches let the lake light pour through. It is a small island, but it feels like its own country. Places like this are why people fall in love with Shetek. Long before any park existed, this lake was part of the homeland of the Dakota people. The lake and its wetlands offered fish, waterfowl, game, and plants in a landscape where such gathering places were precious. Trails and trade routes crossed this prairie country for generations. The names on this land are layered, Ojibwe and Dakota and English, each carrying its own memory. To walk here thoughtfully is to remember that this was never empty land. It was home. By the middle of the 1800s, that older world was under enormous pressure. Treaties signed in that era moved the Dakota onto narrow reservations and opened southern Minnesota to a flood of newcomers. Wagons rolled west, and cabins began to rise beside prairie lakes like this one. The shoreline we are walking saw those first claims staked. Two ways of life now shared one lake, and the arrangement was far from equal. In the years just before 1862, a small settlement of Euro-American families took root around Lake Shetek. They built log cabins, broke prairie sod for crops, and grazed livestock near the water. It was one of the most remote settlements in Minnesota, days of travel from any sizable town. The families depended on the lake, on each other, and on peaceholding. Within the park today, a log cabin from this settlement era still survives as a reminder of just how small and isolated this community was. The summer of 1862 brought Minnesota to a breaking point. The United States had fallen behind on annuity payments promised to the Dakota by treaty, and crop failures and dishonest trading practices left many Dakota families hungry. Anger and desperation spread along the Minnesota River reservations. In August, war broke out between Dakota soldiers and the United States, and violence swept across the southern part of the state. The isolated families at Lake Shetek were directly in its path. It matters to say plainly how the war came about. Treaty after treaty had transferred Dakota land in exchange for payments and provisions that arrived late, arrived short, or were siphoned off by traders. By August of 1862, warehouses held food while Dakota families went hungry nearby. The war that followed was brief and terrible, and it fell hardest on people, Dakota and settler alike, who had little say in the decisions that caused it. What happened at this lake must be understood inside that larger tragedy. History asks us to hold all of it honestly. On the morning of August 20th, 1862, the war reached Lake Shetek. A group of about 40 Dakota men attacked the settlement along this shore. Some settlers fled toward a nearby slough, seeking cover in its tall grass and marsh. By the end of that day, 15 settlers had been killed here and at that slough, and several women and children had been taken captive. 21 others escaped across the open prairie toward safety. It was one of the deadliest days of the war, outside the Minnesota River Valley. The wetland where many of the settlers made their stand lies just east of the lake. It has been known ever since as Slough, a name that preserves the grief of that day. Today the slough is quiet ground, managed by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service as a waterfowl production area. Ducks nest now in the same grasses that once hid fleeing families. The land itself has been given back to the birds. It is a solemn place, and it deserves a visitor's respect. Stories like this one were told for generations in ways that flattened them into simple tales of villains and victims. The fuller truth is harder and more human. Settler families here suffered terribly, and their losses were real. Dakota families also suffered before the war and catastrophically after it, through executions, imprisonment, and exile from Minnesota. Remembering rightly means carrying both griefs at once. This quiet shoreline is a good place to practice that. Out of that terrible autumn came one act of remarkable courage. A group of young Lakota men known as the Fool Soldiers had pledged themselves to a path of peace. In November of 1862, they traveled to the camp where the Shetek captives were being held. They gave up their own horses, blankets, food, and weapons to ransom the surviving women and children. On November 20th, the captives were released into their care and guided toward safety. Their compassion, offered at real personal cost, still shines across a century and a half. After the war, the Shetek settlement lay abandoned for years. In time, farming families returned to this fertile lake country, and the town of Currie grew up nearby with its mill and its railroad connections. The prairie filled with fields, and the lake once again became a place of boats and picnics. But the memory of 1862 never left this shore. The community eventually decided that memory needed a permanent marker. That marker stands in the park today. A granite shaft 25 feet tall was raised beside the lake and dedicated on August 2, 1925, in honor of the settlers who died here in 1862. In 1929, the state established a small park of about 10 acres around the monument. That modest memorial plot was the seed from which the whole state park would grow. What began as a place of mourning slowly became a place of recreation and remembrance together. The park you see around us today largely took shape in the 1930s. When the Great Depression put millions out of work, federal programs put crews to work building parks across America. Here at Shetek, workers laid out roads and trails, raised buildings of split stone in the rustic style, and built the Causeway to Loon Island. Their craftsmanship was meant to last, and it has. Nearly a century later, we are still walking on their work. The Works Progress Administration established a camp here and transformed the little memorial site into a true recreation destination. In 1937, the Minnesota legislature formally established Lake Shetek State Park. The stone and timber structures from that era are now treasured as historic resources in their own right. It is a very American story, a park born from hard times. Public work done well became a public gift that keeps on giving. Every camper and hiker since has been the beneficiary. Today, Lake Shetek State Park is the recreation heart of this corner of Minnesota. Summer brings campers, anglers, paddlers, and swimmers to its shores, drawn by that broad, warm, fish-rich water. Miles of trail loop through the park's woods, wetlands, and restored prairie. In winter, the park goes quiet and white, and the ice fishermen take over the lake. Every season has its own version of Shetek. November, walking it nearly alone, might be the most peaceful version of all. The park also anchors a longer journey. The Casey Jones State Trail connects Lake Shetek State Park with the town of Currie, forming a paved loop of about 6 miles through the surrounding countryside. It invites hikers and bikers out beyond the park boundary, past farm fields and prairie sky. Trails like this stitch the park into the life of its neighboring towns. A visit here can easily become a whole day of wandering. The prairie always has one more mile to offer. A place like Lake Shetek holds many stories in a small compass. Glacial ice and a newborn river, pelicans riding the summer wind and potholes raising the continent's ducks. Dakota homeland, settler cabins, and a war whose grief still asks for our attention. Stone causeways from the Depression years, and a granite monument watching over the water. The prairie keeps all of it, season after season, for anyone willing to walk slowly and pay attention. Our walk at Lake Shetek ends the way November days on the prairie do, with low golden light and a long quiet. If your travels ever bring you to southwestern Minnesota, give this park an afternoon. Cross the Causeway to Loon Island, stand a moment at the monument, and watch the water that becomes the Des Moines River. This lake has carried people for a very long time, and it will carry your memory too. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world.